Hi, everybody. We have some people coming in, so we'll just give a few minutes for everyone to join the meeting, and then we'll get started in 1 or 2 minutes. All right, while we wait for the last few people to join, I can go ahead and start welcoming everybody to this panel today. So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this panel, Finding Future in STEM. My name is Alexandra, and I'm the program manager at Dream and Green. So we're really excited for those of you that are able to join us virtually today for this special event that's brought to you through a partnership between Dream and Green and the Ocean Conservancy. For those of you that are not familiar, Dream and Green is a South Florida-based nonprofit whose mission is to empower individuals, especially youth, to lead in the response to climate change and other environmental challenges. And we do this through our Green Schools Challenge program, which provides environmental education for pre-K through 12 schools here in South Florida. And so through our partnership with the Ocean Conservancy, we are able to provide science-based relevant information to schools through joint lessons that really outline the problems of South Florida's waters and waterways and how students can come up with solutions to those problems. So in addition to working on curriculum, the two organizations are able to come together to offer really unique opportunities like this one that you're in today for our students, middle school and high school students. Before I introduce our moderator, I just wanted to let you know that the panelists will be answering a series of questions, but if anybody in the audience does have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll definitely address those maybe towards the end of our hour together. So let's get started. So I want to introduce Dream and Green Special Programs Coordinator, Marika. She comes through us through a special program via Public Allies, and she's going to be the moderator, and she'll go ahead and introduce the panelists and start asking them questions. So take it away, Marika.
No one say that I was muted. Thank you. So as Alexandra said, I'm Marika, and I'll be moderating. Public Allies is a community organization program, so I'm really excited to be connecting generations and seeing the inspiration being shared between each other. So I'd first like to introduce JP Brooker and ask you to please describe how you arrived at your current profession. How would you describe your career path?
Thank you for the question, and I'm really glad to be here. I'm really glad to be talking to Dream and Green and the audience here out on the internet right now. So my current profession, I'm the director of Florida Conservation for Ocean Conservancy. I'm an attorney by training. I'm a member of the Florida Bar. And I would say my career path started with a deep interest and passion for the Florida marine environment. I'm a native Floridian. I was born and raised on the east coast of Florida in Brevard County, so a little bit further north of South Florida. But I grew up on the Indian River Lagoon and have just seen in my life that waterway deeply affected by pollution and development. And I just knew from a very young age that I wanted to fight on behalf of that iconic Floridian wilderness. So ever since I was little, I knew that that's what I wanted to do, and I've kind of set myself about a career trajectory that would allow me to be as influential as possible in Florida politics and Florida policy.
Thank you so much for that. And then moving on to Erica Nunes, the Senior Manager of the Plastics Initiative. How would you describe your career path?
I would definitely say my career path was non-traditional. I worked full-time during the day and I went to school at night. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, so that definitely isn't where I ended up. In school, reading and writing history were my favorite classes. I wasn't really great in math and I liked science, but it took me a while to get it. So I didn't think a career in STEM was kind of for me. That's not where I was thinking. But then I went to St. Petersburg College in Florida. That's where I finished my bachelor's, and I lived in Florida for like 11 years. And my first working in law firms. I got a job randomly working for NOAA, and being from Florida, you know, that's where you get all your hurricane advisories, right? The National Weather Service. And that's really what started my interest in working in ocean conservation. It really opened my eyes in terms of what the work is and what it means to protect the ocean. And it started just looking at it from a regional perspective in the Gulf of Mexico and the lower Atlantic of the United States. And then I got another, you know, working that job and learning all I could learn about, you know, working for a federal agency and protecting the oceans. And then another opportunity kind of came up to go to Washington, D.C. and work on ocean conservation at a national kind of level. And that was something that's like, oh, wait, no, this is what I want to do. And then, you know, I did that job for a couple of years and learned more about every job has kind of taught me a little bit more about this work and how integrated it is to try to protect our natural resources. And I started doing international work when I was in Washington, D.C. And that opened my eyes to like, oh, wait, no, this is what I want to do now. And to talk about ocean conservation to global leaders. So that's really what led me to my position now with Ocean Conservancy. In my work, I get to do kind of a little bit of both worlds. I work on projects that look to find solutions to the plastic pollution problem. And then on the other side, I also do what's called policy work, where I talk to businesses and governments from all over the world about how they can protect the oceans and prevent plastic pollution from getting into the ocean. So I think I've kind of gone throughout my like career to where I am now by like a lot of chance, a lot of like talking to people and learning more and more things and being open to learning from other people and really finding what really drove my passion and to save the oceans. So.
Oh, that's so wonderful to hear. I always love hearing the non-traditional routes. And then on to Allison Schutz, the director of the International Coastal Cleanup.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so lucky to be here, and I just really appreciate you guys having us. I get the distinct pleasure of working with all of these panelists and our colleagues. So as a director of the International Coastal Cleanup, I basically do beach cleanups for a living. So I get to work with organizations, local organizations, corporations, our colleagues, and travel the world and really try to document what is finding its way to beaches and those things that really shouldn't be there. So plastic bottles, bottle caps, cigarette butts, all the stuff that we all see on local beaches when we travel. Basically, anytime you go to the beach, you know, there's some stuff there that shouldn't be there. So what me and my team do is we just go and we try to document that stuff and obviously remove it. My path to get to this place, I feel like perhaps maybe not as untraditional as Erica's, but I feel like I kept trying to take a left turn, and the ocean and kind of STEM and science and environmental studies, I feel like kept kind of just dragging me back. I went to Rollins College in Orlando with the intent of doing environmental studies. I knew I didn't want a traditional 9-to-5, sit in the office type work. I thought I wanted to work outside, and I really thought I wanted to do something with animals and work with animals, maybe kids, I don't know, kind of similar, right? Like when we're kids, we're kind of like animals, and you know, it's kind of the same, right? We do a lot of fun things, have a lot of fun outside. So I entered college thinking I want to do environmental studies, and I will be honest, I got a little depressed. I was like, this is not what we are learning in class is all doom and gloom, and I want to learn how to make a difference and learn how to make an impact and, you know, have a little fun doing it. So then I went through basically a myriad of perhaps all the different programs that a small liberal arts college offered. I think the count was like 6 or 7 majors I kind of went through, and I landed on psychology as kind of a route that I felt like I could do a lot of different things with it. I really enjoyed my child development classes. There were some training courses and just a lot of kind of different stuff. And then I found a niche in terms of education and marine education. So I ended up working at an aquarium for about 6 years and working with kids and kind of pairing kids and animals and doing education and trying to bring the importance and the impact and the wonder of our ocean and communicating that to individuals and to school groups. And I loved it, and I fell in love with it. And then like I said, I tried to take a left turn and try to go, maybe I want to work kind of like Erica was talking, maybe on the policy side, maybe on this like more global issue. I feel like I'm making an impact, but maybe there's something else I could do. And I went to grad school, thought I wanted to be a city planner and, really look at how do we develop on the coast in a sustainable way. And got into, some interest there and then found Ocean Conservancy, found a job working in marine plastics, ocean plastics, working with Erica and the team. And honestly, that was 9 years ago and haven't looked back since. Tried to think I was going to head away from the ocean space, and just kind of like Erica, the more experience I had, the more I was like, this is what I want to do. And then the more we get to kind of do some of that stuff, it's like, yeah, this is it. So yeah, it's just a little bit of luck and a lot of just trying to grow within myself and really identify what it was that kind of made me excited to get up in the morning.
Oh, that's lovely. I like that plan. And then finally, Jacob Peterson, the Associate Director of Events and Partnerships.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. And thank you. Actually, it's great. I've worked at Ocean Conservancy for a few years now and worked closely with Allison and JP and Erica. And it's kind of nice to actually hear their story told by them, because I think there's a lot of similarities and like I learned new things, which is kind of great. So that's always kind of fun. But so I actually at Ocean Conservancy, so I'm Associate Director of Events and Partnerships. My role largely focuses on event planning and raising money for the organization so that we can continue to do our work on behalf of the ocean. And so my story actually is also very unconventional. I grew up in an Air Force family. I was born in Germany. I've lived in all across the country, lived in 8 different states. I actually spent about 7 years as a kid in Florida, up in Navarre, which is like a small Gulf town near Destin, where there's a lot of military families that live there. And some of my earliest childhood memories are really of the ocean, of fishing with my dad and older brother, and how excited I was when I caught my first flounder at the age of 6, or going to the beach. And my dad had this old car called a Datsun, which probably many people in this car don't know what that is. So I may be showing my age a little bit. But my brother and I would look through the floorboards. It was kind of our beach car, and there was a giant hole, and we would look through, and like as we were going over the bridge, we would try to catch glimpses of the water as we were on our way to the beach. So I have a lot of really great memories, like so many people, so many of my colleagues here on this call, that we have this kind of love for the ocean, and it's really fueled our fascination and interest in wanting to pursue a career in kind of the environmental sector or in STEM. And part of that for me was when I was growing up as a kid, I loved the work of primatologist Jane Goodall, who is a renowned woman scientist who really defied the norm. She didn't have a formal education. She went into the wild in 1960 to study wild chimpanzees. And I grew up and I read her books, and since from an early age, I was like so excited. I wanted to be just like her. I was like, maybe I'll go work for animals, kind of like what Allison was talking about, like maybe I'll work with animals, maybe I'll kind of work in the scientific field. As I kind of got older, it was hard for me to figure out what I wanted to do. And I was often very jealous of like kids that I felt like had figured it out. They wanted to be a lawyer or a doctor or a firefighter or a police officer or a teacher. And it's like, oh man, I wish I knew what I wanted to do. And so when I went into college, I actually was going to school out in Georgia, and I entered as a biology major. And after my first biology class, I was like, oh, I really don't want to do this. Like, science is not my thing, at least in this particular field. And much like Allison, I went through a lot of different majors, and I kind of landed in the anthropology, sociology space, really liked it, really enjoyed kind of learning about human behavior and history and our connection to the animal kingdom. And it really kind of seemed like a perfect solution. But the question kind of always lingered in terms of like, how would that schooling translate into a career? And so long story short, I ended up getting a degree in English and humanities. And then I eventually, just actually a few years ago, or last year, I guess, graduated with a degree in environmental science, kind of continuing this love for the science field and kind of working in different organizations. And so throughout my career, I've worked in a lot of different jobs. I've worked for several different environmental nonprofits. I got my degree, or sorry, got my start actually working in events just by happenstance. I actually was living in Los Angeles. I had moved out there after I'd gotten my degree in English, and kind of my two goals living in Los Angeles was to learn how to surf and to enjoy the way of the California life, which is very leisure. And I got bored. I started volunteering, got into events, ended up landing my first event job at the California Science Center, which is the science museum out there. I quickly had a great time, you know, got to plan a lot of really cool events. And then from there, I kind of moved on. I was living in LA. I found this job actually working for the Jane Goodall Institute. So, and working directly for Jane Goodall, my childhood hero. And I almost didn't apply for the job. I was like, everyone's going to want that job. Why am I special? Why am I going to get it? Made a last minute decision and applied for it. Fast forward, I got the job. I worked for Jane for 5 years, planning her lecture tours. I spent about 3 or 4 months out of the year with her on the road. And then from there, I transitioned to another job working kind of in events and fundraising. And then 2 years ago, or a little over 2 years ago, I started working for Ocean Conservancy. And so with that, like on any given day, I can be planning an event, working with one of our corporate partners or individual donors, supporting our work, coordinating with celebrities on projects that we do. And I've gotten to do a lot of really cool events, and I work with a lot of great people here. So yeah, I think by sharing that, I more so just want to stress to kind of everybody on the call that, you know, we have a lot of people on here that we all have non-traditional paths, and it's okay. We all kind of have gotten to our career fields based on the path that we took and the experiences that we had. So we're excited to kind of share more about that.
Thank you again to all the panelists for sharing such personal routes of development, I guess to say. We're going to just continue on and go with the first question. JP, I was wondering, what does STEM mean to you?
Yeah, so I mean, STEM, it's this acronym that we hear so much about: science, technology, engineering, math, and all of that's extremely important, but I think you really need it to be STEAM, right? Which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And I think, you know, a lot of us on this call come from a background that's not necessarily science-based. I myself have an undergraduate degree in English and humanities, just like Jacob. And I'm not a scientist, and people who go to law school are not scientists, but we rely heavily upon scientists. I work so closely with scientists on a daily basis. Just before this call, I was emailing with scientists at the University of Florida to figure out how we can get new water quality monitoring going to figure out what's going on in Tampa Bay with this big toxic spill that you might have heard about. And so working closely with scientists is critical if you want to get policy wins and get new laws put in place. Because if the laws that you're working on, if the regulations you're trying to implement are not science-based, they're not going to be effective, and they're not going to be taken seriously, and you're not going to achieve those wins for the marine environment that you really want to achieve. So while I may not be a scientist, I rely desperately on science, technology, engineering, and math, and also on that artistic angle that I mentioned. I think that's something you always want to keep in mind.
Would any of the panelists like to add to that, or have any considerations of what STEAM or STEM means to them?
Yeah, I'd be happy to jump in. I think, as JP said, you know, STEAM is very important, or STEM or STEAM, however you want to say it, but it's very important. But I think, you know, taking it back in terms of everybody that's on this panel, we all kind of did different career paths, or, you know, different educational paths, but we've still kind of have landed at an environmental organization. We're still kind of working in that field. I think for me, you know, something that I think about, I told you I got a degree in environmental science, not because I'm like crazy about environmental science or I'm good at it by any means, but it was really a way for me to be able to advance my education, and also to be able, as I work in talking to donors or working with some of our programmatic people or scientists that we work with, having a better understanding of what are the issues that are going on our planet and kind of the different scientific approaches that happen. So it's good to kind of have that background knowledge. And I think for students that are going, to classes, you may really like science and math classes, you may not. But I think all of that is super important, and we still kind of use it in our day-to-day lives and in our jobs. And so I think STEM is such of a larger field than just those kind of key areas. And it's okay if you're not good at one of those. It doesn't mean that you can't pursue a career in environmental work or you can't work kind of in the field. Like there are tons of people at our organization that support us doing policy work, or as Allison is doing beach cleanups, I do events, JP, runs one of our programs. We have people that do communications and accounting. And so it's, you can still kind of work in the field without having to have the hard science background.
Thank you for that addition. And then I'd like to go to Erica and hear in on what is the biggest challenge for you that you face in your current field of work? What are you working towards, or what's your ultimate goal?
I think there's kind of two answers for that question. Personally, for me, the biggest challenge has been throughout my career. I'm a person of color, and for me, coming into this field, I didn't see a lot of people that looked like me in meetings or going to conferences or, speaking up in leadership roles. So it felt really weird, and it felt kind of like, well, maybe I don't, belong here, or feeling like maybe I shouldn't say anything. So I think that was a challenge that I had early on, definitely. And then as my work progressed and as I got more involved, I met a lot more people of color that were doing some really cool things. I think the way I grew up, science wasn't a big topic in my household. It wasn't a big focus. It was definitely, yes, you need to go to college and get a job, but I wasn't exposed to those types of positions. So really working in ocean conservation or in environmentalism wasn't even a thought process. And then coming into it early on, I didn't see a lot of people that looked like me, that had backgrounds that were like mine, that were, not traditional. I went to school at night and I worked during the day. And that for me was a challenge, but I think as I grew and as I met more people and as I learned, I was like, oh, there are, meteorologists and there are social scientists and engineers that also have different backgrounds and perspectives. And I think overcoming that hurdle was the first one. I think for this field, it's getting better, but there's definitely more that can be done. So for me, one of the personal goals is to, engage in these types of conversations and especially with the younger generation, to let them know, hey, there are, if you are different, it's okay. Like, you don't have to look or sound or have the same background or family structure or other things to do this kind of work. Like, we need people that have varying backgrounds, because really the solutions that we're trying to fix are big, they're huge, they're real critical problems, and we need people that can think differently, that don't all think alike, to come up with the solutions that are going to work. So I think for that would be probably for me like the biggest goal, the biggest challenge. Yeah.
Well, I really agree with that point, especially we need to focus on the community perspectives that are so often left out. Would anyone else like to add to that point before we move on to the next question? Or what of their biggest challenges they face in their career? No? Okay, then I'd like to stick with Erica again. What opportunities exist for high school students that have an interest in environmentalism? It seems like you've had plenty of different inlets and sites of where to start, so.
I think so with environmentalism, there's so much opportunity, and it's something that you don't, number one, you don't have to wait till you graduate high school. You don't have to wait till you graduate college to then decide, okay, maybe I should, like, maybe this is what I want to do. Like, really to start engaging in environmentalism is something that you could do now. It's really about looking at a problem that has negative impacts to our environment and trying to find solutions or ways to fix it. And that's something that you could do at your schools. That's something that you could do in your neighborhood. That's something that you can do for your city. It doesn't have to be something that you have to wait. So I think that's like the biggest opportunity, is that you don't have to wait. If you see a problem that's that's an issue in your community, you can start now and have conversations and start to build momentum and look at, well, what can I do to fix it? And I think it's really underestimated what the kind of power that has. And kind of in a broader sense, like for the kind of work that I do, like I go to a lot of international meetings and conferences, and there always is a youth focus or a youth summit. So that's also something that can be tapped into, like our Ocean Conference or the United Nations Environmental Assembly. Like you could Google those, do a search function and look at those. And there's always a youth summit or a youth portion that's dedicated to hearing from the future of our planet. And that's really what you all are, is the future. And we need you. So that would be kind of my first-hand advice of what's out there.
I'd like to add to what Erica was saying, just specifically to South Florida and Miami. There are local groups that are very, very much worth getting involved in, and you probably know some of them, but one that immediately comes to mind, for example, is Miami Waterkeeper. And Miami Waterkeeper is located right there in your backyard, and they've done a tremendous amount of good for Biscayne Bay and for the Miami River and for the Atlantic Ocean. And there's always volunteer opportunities with a group like that, and for you to get involved. And then also just kind of taking that even further, Ocean Conservancy, who we all work for and who Allison runs our International Coastal Cleanup. We have this annual International Coastal Cleanup that's a great way to get involved and get out and get on the beach and clean up those bodies of water that are so important to you. And every time we do these cleanups, we have students getting credit hours for volunteerism or whatever the case may be. So there's all kinds of opportunities there to actually go in and get your hands dirty in your backyard. And I think that's a really great way to start your environmental career as well.
Yeah, thanks JP for that, because I think just continuing off of that is, I think there's so many opportunities to volunteer, as Erica and JP just noted. And also I think, one thing that we know is there's so much passion and energy and creativity from kind of our next generation, and our next generation are definitely obviously our next leaders. And so an issue like plastics that we work on, we're constantly trying to figure out what is a new solution? What is a new way to engage people? A new way to capture trash so it doesn't reach our beaches and our waterways? What are some new things that maybe I just not thinking of? Because we all grow up very differently. As Eric was saying, we need people with different backgrounds, at people of different ages to really contribute to solutions. And it doesn't have to, solutions and leadership does not need to come from 40-year-olds with PhDs, right? It can come from 10, 15, 20-year-olds who are out there seeing what they're seeing in their own community, in their backyard, and realize like, one thing I've noticed in the canal that runs behind my house is that we're always seeing this one type of trash. And I wonder, that's interesting because, that actually reminds me of some of the plastic cutlery that's coming out of my, family's favorite restaurant. Like, I wonder if there's like a correlation there. And then sometimes all it takes to fix that one problem is one person going to that restaurant and saying, hey, could we maybe actually transition into reusable cutlery, or I've read that, whatever, it can take just simple actions that it doesn't matter how old you are, what type of formal or informal schooling you have, that really can change our communities for the better. And so we are constantly looking and hosting high school interns in addition to college interns, but high school interns to come work with us, get the credit that's needed to graduate, but also give us different perspectives and really kind of push us to think differently and to think more creatively about all sorts of different solutions that might be out there to a problem that, because of my age and my background, I'm only thinking perhaps with certain types of blinders on. So I think just don't feel limited by your age, by your interests. I think there's so much opportunity in addition to the volunteerism to really have tangible impact and really informing the solutions that are needed to solve these really big problems that we work on.
Yeah, and I can jump in. I think I think it's super important. I think we all kind of stress, everybody that is kind of tuning in, like you have your own voice and you add so much to it. And you also provide a lot of hope to us, because future generations are thinking about these issues in different ways. And I think there's also a lot of resources out there, as my colleagues have mentioned, but there's also organizations that have kind of youth leadership councils where you can actually have your voice heard. There's a few nonprofits that do it. There's Ocean Heroes Boot Camp, which is one that we know that, you know, they work with youth. So I think there's a lot of opportunities in which you're able to really be able to have an impact and be able to use your voice, and whether it's giving back through volunteering or, you know, whatever it may be. But yeah, so we're super excited, and I think there's just a lot of great resources out there.
I think those are all really good starting points. Thank you so much for that. Would anyone have any advice or like to chime in on what advice they would give to someone in your field? I think we've touched on it here and there, but any concrete advice that you guys have received or would like to push forward?
I can start, and I'm sure each of us have some important advice, but some advice that I have is be passionate about whatever particular type of conservation field you're going into. If you want to be a conservationist, you can be a conservationist, but you should really come at it from a really truly organic spot. Like I mentioned, I grew up on the Indian River Lagoon, and I've seen the trials and tribulations of that waterway, and I knew that was something I wanted to protect. So that was my inspiration for my passion. But you know, you can find that inspiration just about anywhere. I mean, whether it is even in that canal in your backyard that Allison mentioned, I mean, there's a teeming wonder of wildlife in a canal like that, and you can find, you know, that inspiration anywhere. But I would say go after a conservation career with passion, first and foremost in your heart.
Yeah, I might go next then, JP, because I feel like that is set. It was such a great kind of setup, I think, with passion, because also I would say never give up, because I think if you're coming at this from passion, the barriers and the hurdles that we all eventually face, it doesn't matter who you are eventually going to face battles and hurdles and speed bumps along the way. And I think having kind of that passion to continue driving us forward is, I think, really critical. And one of the things I think that is a constant effort for all of us as humans is, I think, also, you know, checking our egos, I think, is one of the things, is keeping in you know, intact our passion and what's driving us to the end goal, even if you don't know what that end goal is. I mean, I still to this day, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. I know I'm having a heck of a time right now, though, and I'm loving it. So maybe this is it. But not being terrified about not knowing what that end goal is, but really kind of letting your passion drive. I think in terms of the ego side of things, I think one of the biggest things is doing whatever you can to kind of take small steps to reach those goals and to kind of reach things that really kind of hit at your passion project, and whether it's math, whether it's environmental studies, whether it's you know, Florida conservation, whatever it is. So I think getting your foot in the door, whether it starts as a volunteer opportunity or an internship, or a role that you think you're very overqualified for, because you have so much work experience, you did so well in school that you should be, you know, way ahead. Sometimes what's key is just getting your foot in the door and then having that passion to keep driving and keep moving, and keep taking those small steps and celebrate those small wins. Celebrate the fact that you got your foot in the door. Even if you think you should be running the company, getting your foot in the door is really the key there. And all of that adds up to making really amazing impact for our ocean and for our world, regardless of which career path you end up taking.
I can go next, kind of building on what Allison and JP said. On the one end, for being prepared for obstacles and just to keep going. You're always going to run into some bumps and some disappointments and failures, but to just believe in yourself, to keep going. And I think that is something that, with your passion and with everything else, is going to be what kind of propels you to succeed in what you want to achieve. And I think another thing that's helped me along my career is, I've been lucky that I've found mentors along the way, people that had more experience than me or were doing a job that I was really interested in. So I would ask them questions and say, hey, I saw that you did this, or I read that you wrote this paper, or something that they did that kind of spurred some questions, and I've been lucky that they've been really open to helping me. And when I had a question about something, answering it. And I think that's really valuable when you're trying to figure out what it is that you want to do and what you want to do with your career. And if you're looking at a STEM career, if you see something that's of interest to you, or you see somebody speak, don't be afraid to ask a question and say, how did you get there? And what did you do? And do you have any advice for me? And that will really take you a long way and really help you along.
Yeah, and I think everything has pretty much been said. I would say definitely find something that you're truly excited and passionate about, which I think every single one of us on this call can kind of attest to, because that's really going to be your driving force. You're not going to want to do something forever that you don't like, and you're not going to put in the effort and the time and continue to want to learn and grow and fix a problem that may seem overwhelming. I think it's also can be, for me especially, I was a very indecisive kid. I was a very indecisive student. And it was super overwhelming to try to pick one thing. And so I think, but I say that, and that you really try to figure out what you want to do, but know that if you don't like something, you can switch. It's not, I think, some of us here on this call, like, we've had very different even jobs within our career path. We haven't been doing the same thing we've been doing exactly to that T. We've grown in our in the work that we've done and all of that. And I think that's also just important to keep in mind. And knowing that the job isn't going to be perfect, I think is another thing. So I think you basically can grow with the work that you're doing, and then as you kind of progress in your career or in your schooling, you kind of figure out what you don't like and what you do like, and you kind of shift gears based on that. So.
Thank you so much, all the panelists, for your time and all your insights. I can really appreciate that. Does the audience have any questions? Now is a great time to unmute yourself and ask, or drop it in the Q&A. Give it a minute. In the meantime, we have received a question. Do you have any advice on how a marine science college student could begin working for the Ocean Conservancy?
I can start. We are always hiring, so look at our jobs page. And we do hire folks fresh out of college. It's happened numerous times. But I think oftentimes it's worthwhile to gain experience in the marine conservation world. And so the more you can do in addition to your degree in marine science in college, whether that's working on specific research projects at the Marine Science College, or participating in volunteer type activities, or getting involved in your community, the more that's going to distinguish you when it comes to looking to get hired by Ocean Conservancy. I haven't actually personally hired anyone with a degree in marine science, but that's peculiar to me. Perhaps Allison has. I'm sure she has, in fact. So, I mean, maybe you can give some more insight to it.
Definitely, I do. I have a marine science major from Eckerd, I believe, on my team, and I'm trying to think, a few marine scientists. Yeah, I mean, one thing that I've found valuable as well is finding an organization like Ocean Conservancy, and then kind of learning about some of these sister organizations and some of the similar organizations out there to help kind of, again, like JP was saying, learn and gain that experience. I have found the listservs that kind of round out marine jobs. I believe there's a Florida specific one that is really great. I think there's some national ones. So there's some really great listservs that really kind of seem to actually do all the work for you on kind of compiling all the jobs and giving you like the quick hits in terms of how much experience the post is looking for. And really, I can only just second all of what JP said in terms of keeping an eye out on the jobs page. I think that's where luck comes into a lot of this at play, right? Is just kind of stumbling upon the jobs page the right time when we're hiring, for the right role. And then just gaining experience any way possible. And also recognizing that experience comes in a lot of different forms. I tend to hire a lot of folks with public speaking experience and public engagement and outreach. So that could be volunteering at a local library and doing presentations, because one thing that we do when working beach cleanups, similar to Jacob, and basically it's large events. And so being comfortable kind of thinking on your toes and interacting with large groups of people, that is one thing that might not really equate to marine science, but one thing that we, at least on my particular team, we do look for when we're doing kind of the scan through the first round of resumes and those cover letters, which I know probably are a pain, but those cover letters can be really important because that's the opportunity to tie something like a volunteer experience at a library or at a school, any sort of that weird experience that you might not feel like aligns. Your cover letter is an awesome opportunity to really tie that and say, what I did here, I think is very valuable to you because I can now speak into a void of a computer in these days, or in terms of 200 people and feel really comfortable and confident about doing that. So I think it's finding those opportunities for experience and being creative about ways that it really kind of will then fuel that passion. But keeping an eye on our job site, and we are always looking for marine science folks who are excited to get in and get their hands dirty.
And I put a really good job board in the chat that you should look at for Seven Seas Media. They kind of collect every job in North America, really, that pertains to or touches marine science or policy in some way. So it's definitely worth looking at.
Thank you both for the really practical advice as well. We did receive another question then. What are some of the different policies or laws that you have contributed towards getting passed? Thank you, Tim.
I'll take an additional crack at that as the lawyer on the panel, but others probably have a say in that as well. But Ocean Conservancy has been around since 1972, and so we've got our fingerprints on many, many, many laws in the United States. And some of them are ones you probably have never heard of, including, for example, the Magnuson-Stevens Act, which deals with fisheries conservation. It's one of the nation's blue ribbon environmental laws that a lot of folks don't even know about. I mean, it's as important as the Endangered Species Act or the Clean Air Act or the Clean Water Act. But Ocean Conservancy has been deeply involved in the Magnuson-Stevens Act and its reauthorizations in the 80s and 90s and in the 2000s. We've won lots of policy wins at the federal and state level, dealing with microplastics, with ocean acidification, with wildlife protections through the creation of marine protected areas, marine mammal protections. We work in Tallahassee on a near constant basis in March and April. That's when our session is. In fact, we're in session right now, trying to implement legislation on harmful algal blooms, water quality and abundance, seaport regulations with respect to cruise lines and emissions, carbon pollution, sea level rise. I mean, you name it, if it touches the ocean, we're working on writing laws about it, and we're working with legislators at the state and federal level to make sure that our ocean planet's protected. So, I mean, that's really our bread and butter. You can go to our website and learn about just about any of those initiatives that we've got, but Ocean Conservancy really does work at that nexus of science and policy, and we're looking for legislative wins, and that's what we do.
Wonderful, thank you for that thorough answer. Then we have this next one. With the COVID-19 pandemic situation, many places are not open for volunteer activities. Do you have any recommendations for activities that students can do online or remotely, like virtual programs, virtual labs, etc.?
Yeah, I might take a crack at this, and then obviously everyone else, please jump in. That's a great point. You are totally right that with the pandemic, a lot of the traditional volunteering opportunities are just not as available. A few things. So through this pandemic and through kind of our current situation, folks can still go out if beaches are open and it's safe and socially distanced. You can still go out and collect trash. And using Ocean Conservancy's mobile app, CleanSwell, you can document your efforts using the mobile app. And all you have to do is just send us a quick email. I'll put it in the chat in terms of an email, a contact email to reach out to. So if you're looking for volunteer hours, we are happy to look at your data submission and sign off on your volunteer hours. That's another opportunity to try to be creative in this kind of unprecedented time in terms of here's what I still am doing for our ocean, for my community, despite everything else that is going on right now. So that is one way. Another way is kind of through some of the traditional models of reaching out to a lot of those local organizations, volunteercleanup.org, the Miami Waterkeeper. There's a lot of great organizations that have already come up in the chat. And they most likely have some jobs and some work that can be done remote that would help them. For example, one of the things that we do and rely on significantly that helps what JP just laid out in terms of policy work is the data collection side of what people are finding and collecting off of beaches and waterways around the world. That takes a lot of time to go in and actually enter those data because a lot of people are still perhaps collecting those data with a pen and paper. And so a lot of our partners are still looking for assistance to help upload some of that. There could be opportunities to still do some of the virtual volunteer options, like presenting to maybe a kindergarten class about manatees or something like that, that may be traditionally through a library system and you would go and do it there in person. But now a lot of places have set up very similar type activities where perhaps you could do the same type of work, but in a virtual environment. And then just be persistent in terms of, bugging people like us. Like I said, I'll put an email up and seeing if there's ways that you can just engage and assist and put in some of that time to really help kind of build your experience. And also sometimes it's not just about building experience, it's trying to figure out if you even enjoy it. Right? As you might think you might really enjoy something, but when you get into kind of the day-to-day slog of it, you're like, ooh, glad I did this volunteer opportunity because this actually may change my mind a little bit about what my long-term vision of my career path is. So I think we've been talking a lot about building your experience, but sometimes it's more even than that, than building your experience, just trying to figure out if this is stuff you enjoy.
Yeah, just to add to what Alice had mentioned on the back end, a lot of the conferences and meetings and things that you would have to be in a room to hear about and learn about new reports or new scientific studies or all the things that are going on in conservation or other areas, you would have to be in the room. And because of COVID, all of those things have now transitioned online. So that's another opportunity for you to sign up to some of these things. A lot of them are free, or you can see the recording afterwards if you don't want to sign up. A lot of times they'll release the recordings afterwards and you can look and learn. And that's another way to kind of what Allison said, maybe you're not interested in it, right? And maybe it's something that isn't for you, but that's another way to kind of take advantage of, the limits that COVID's kind of put on us in the last year and finding other ways that you can engage and learn.
And I think quickly to just add, I think too, is that, there are opportunities like this one that Dreaming Green is offering, which I think is really great. So I hope, all of you have learned something from the conversations we've had. We're actually planning to do another event in partnership with Dreaming Green next month, those details will be coming out soon, which is kind of going to be geared towards students and teachers. So I think there's a lot of organizations that are doing that. We at Ocean Conservancy, so I lead all of our events, and I will say, COVID has definitely made an impact. I used to spend a lot of my time on the road doing in-person events. Allison, the same. I think, Erica and JP as well. And so it really has changed being able to reach different audiences. And so we've really kind of shifted and have done virtual events that are about, programmatic things, as well as some like fun interactive events. And we also record a lot of them. So if you go to our YouTube page, a lot of them are up there that you can actually watch. So some of them may be super technical, like we did a climate conference in January that was a 2-day summit with leaders from 15 different countries that is very technical, and if you're interested in that, you can take a look. But there's also some fun ones. We did a cooking event with a chef down in Miami talking about sustainable fishing. And we've done a lot of kind of like in conversation events, just talking with experts about particular issues. And Ocean Conservancy has a few others. We have one that Allison's doing next month, or actually this month, later this month, on recycling and talking about ocean plastics. So I think there's good opportunities there for like learning in terms of being able to, partake in some of these virtual event opportunities and just kind of programmatic things. So.
Amazing opportunities you all gave. Thank you. Now we have another question from an ecology teaching watching with her high school students from the Dominican Republic at New Horizons School in Santo Domingo. They would like to ask about your international work and partnerships.
Okay, well, I guess I could start with that one. So for me, a lot of our work kind of started, and I think we work like my team works specifically on plastics, and initially, the focus area was in Asia and Southeast Asian regions, and now kind of the global nature of plastic pollution has kind of turned that focus, and we've actually started working in Latin America. And it's great to hear Dominican Republic, because actually both of my parents are from Dominican Republic, so it's wonderful to hear that there's a representation from there. So we've started to engage in Latin America and looking at working with partners and projects within the region. So we're right now in Colombia and in Mexico, not so much in the Caribbean yet, but that is something that has been, has come up as, we're based in the United States, and it's such a close region for us. But it really is, it's a global issue, and it needs to be looked at it globally and at a global perspective, and everybody can play a role. So aside from the project work, I represent us at international meetings like the UN Environment Assembly and some other kind of international bodies that discuss the plastic pollution issue. And that's another area that we can engage and talk about this issue and try to get solutions. Based on local, we come in with our perspective, but it's really going to need local perspective, local culture perspective in order to get to real solutions. So.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Would anyone else like to add to this question, or does anyone else in the audience have another question they'd like to ask before we close out for the day? No.
And while anyone's thinking of a question, I just wanted to remind the students that are on this call today that you are eligible to receive community service letters for attending the session. So if you can drop your name and your school and your contact information in the chat, so we can get those letters to you. And while we wait for any other questions that do come in, I did want to give the panelists an opportunity, if you had a closing remark or any last minute advice that we can give the students that are on this call. I don't know who wants to jump in with that.
Yeah, I'll start. And I think one thing you should keep in mind with respect to our organization is that we offer numerous opportunities to get involved on some of the legislative solutions that I mentioned, or a specific action that may be forthcoming. And you can go to our website, oceanconservancy.org. And if you go to our Action Center, there's an opportunity there to get involved on a lot of different issues, whether that's dealing with protection for sea turtles or manatees, or I know one that's coming up soon that will be supporting or actually giving opposition to a proposal to drill for oil in the Everglades, which I'm sure folks on this call will be interested in opposing. So I highly recommend going to, again, our website, oceanconservancy.org, and look at our Action Alert Center, and you can really find some opportunities to get engaged and get involved.
Oh, okay. I saw Allison come off on mute. The only thing I will quickly add, I think, is don't feel limited. Don't feel like, if you have an idea, or if you have a passion, or if you, don't feel like you're limited or in a box, or things are impossible. I think you always, especially in this line of work, and in terms of trying to save environmental, and save the environment, right, that it involves and needs a lot of creativity. These are problems that have been existing and have come to this point where we see so many issues, but don't feel limited in your aspirations and what you want to achieve, and just don't give up.
I couldn't agree more. I was just going to come off mute and say, also, no action is too small. A lot of the issues we work on are big, scary. I was just on a call with JP, and he was explaining kind of what is all the details of what's going on in Florida. And I texted a colleague and I said, so basically end of the world. Yeah. So basically big, scary issues, but no action is too small. And all of those little actions, even if it's just picking up one piece of trash in a safe manner, especially during COVID, but even if it's just picking up one small thing when you see it on a walk, that's one less thing that's out in our environment. It's one less thing that's going to make its way to the ocean. So even if clicking on a link on the Ocean Conservancy website feels like a small effort, those impacts and all of those actions add up to really making a significant difference. So you don't have to solve the world's problems alone, and you don't need the great big solution to make a difference. Everything that we all do on a daily basis, even if it feels small, we need to celebrate it, and it really does make an impact. So don't give up.
Yeah, and I think I would just add, I was just going to add final, I think I encourage everyone on this call. I know we focus, the focus is kind of like future and STEM careers. And I think I would encourage you to figure out, if you have an idea of a job that you want, try to find somebody that is doing it and talk to them, and maybe do a little bit of research about like, what are the careers out there that, and what are they looking for? Like, are they looking for a particular type of education or work experience? And all of us, I think we can say we came in, there's always an entry level, like ground level point at which you come in. I came to doing events with nonprofits strictly because I was volunteering, and then I just kind of fell into it, and I started kind of at lower level and worked my way up. I would encourage you to to reach out to people, or find people that you're interested in doing the work that they're doing. And I think I can speak for all of us probably to say, we're also happy to talk to you. We partner with Dream and Green, and we're happy to have them provide, a way to get in touch with us. I know Allison threw the cleanup inbox in the chat, but we're also happy to give you larger perspective of kind of how we got here, where we think people should, where you should focus, or answer any additional questions that we may not have covered on this call. But definitely remain hopeful, have fun with it. I think it's really fun to figure out what you want to do, and it may seem scary, but it's also exciting, and it's a lot of fun. It's a wild ride, and you get to do a lot of really cool things. So.
Thank you. And then we received one more question. Would you recommend going to graduate school for a career in ocean conservation? I don't know.
A graduate degree definitely helps. I think a lot of us do have graduate degrees. Not everyone does, though, by any shape of the imagination. And you can make up for a lack of a graduate degree with a lot of passion and also experience, I think. But I mean, personally, I do think it does pave the way, but it's not a bar. Not having a graduate degree is definitely not a bar to getting into conservation work.
And don't be afraid about doing it separate. I tend to hire a lot of people straight out of undergrad who are looking to get a few years of experience. Not only that helps you get into graduate school, but it kind of enables you to create a foundation of experience and work to help direct then what you want to do in graduate school. So my team's probably tired of me hearing it, but I highly encourage folks to come out of undergrad, get some experience under their belt, and then it helps kind of clear the focus for graduate school down the pathway a little bit. Now, granted, most of my folks aren't lawyers, so I think lawyers are a little different, but don't be afraid of those non-traditional paths, taking classes at night while working and getting those experiences. Basically, all of those pathways work. And at the end of the day, like JP said, passion makes up education is not a requirement to do to have a positive impact.
Well, and I'll note also, I didn't go straight to law school out of undergraduate school. I had to take 5 years myself to figure out exactly what it was I wanted to do. So, I mean, there is no direct path and things can change, and it pays to be nimble, I think.
I appreciate that last sentiment. It pays to be nimble, especially during these times. I think we've all noticed that. And I think with that, it's 4 o'clock now. So thank you to all our panelists again for all of your insights and really being personal with us and sharing that inspiration and building those community networks. I hope the students you enjoyed and were able to gain some inspiration from all this. That's all from me. Alexandra, do you have anything to add?
No, again, just to echo Marika, thank you so much to our panelists and thank you for joining us. And I definitely recommend, tapping into the resources that all the panelists had mentioned, the websites, the other community organizations, to figure out your own path. And you're definitely, you're making those first steps by, being on a call like this and getting that information. So thank you to everybody that joined us. And JP dropped his information in the chat. So we'd love to be a resource for you as well. So you can always contact, Dream Green or also the Ocean Conservancy if you need help. So thank you very much for joining us, and we hope to see you at our next event. Thank you, everybody.